Billionaire dumped her at the altar. What she did next shook Paris fashion to its core. Part 3. Chapter 18, The Revenge Collection. They called it the most anticipated show in the history of Paris Fashion Week, but it wasn't on the official calendar. There were no trailers. No behind-the-scenes leaks. Just a single invite, delivered in black wax-sealed envelopes that read: Maison Devereux presents, The Revenge Collection. Venue, Palais Garnier. Time, when the curtain falls. That was all. No date. No explanation. Just a promise. The entire city buzzed. And in the days that followed, everything shifted. It happened on the final night of Paris Fashion Week, at the Palais Garnier, the opera house where generations of cultural royalty had gathered for over a century. The lobby was drenched in candlelight. The air smelled of sandalwood and tension. Guests entered in silence, unsure if they were walking into a fashion show or a reckoning. The runway wasn't a runway at all, it was the stage, framed by velvet curtains and towering gold leaf pillars. No music. No MC. Just a program printed in blood-red ink. At the top of the page, a collection designed not to heal, but to remember. The lights fell. The crowd hushed. Then, slowly, the curtain rose, revealing a single figure standing center stage. Adrian Crest. Wearing a sharply tailored black tuxedo, face expressionless, body still. A single spotlight pinned him in place like an exhibit. And then, from the wings, the music began, a slow, haunting remix of the wedding march. Gasps. Whispers. Audible shock. Adrian didn't move. Because he wasn't here by choice. He was contractual obligated, part of the final clause he had signed during the company's restructure, buried in fine print Isla's lawyers had inserted with surgical precision. He thought he was endorsing a collection. He didn't realize he was the opening look. One by one, the models appeared, each wearing a twisted version of traditional bridal wear. A deconstructed ball gown with razor-cut seams, the train shredded like a memory. A pearl-studded mini-dress worn backwards, veil replaced with a crystal-studded cage. A white tuxedo jacket paired with a blood-red tulle skirt that trailed behind like a battlefield. A cathedral-length veil embroidered not with lace, but with transcripts of the internal proposal Adrian wrote to exploit Isla. Every look was a chapter. Every step was a sentence. Every design, a punishment made beautiful. At the climax of the show, the orchestra swelled, violins racing, heartbeats rising, and the stage lights snapped to full brightness. And then, Isla walked out. She wore a gown unlike anything seen before. A jet black silk slip, cut like a blade, with a golden bodice molded to her torso like armor. The back was bare, raw, unapologetic, and the train shimmered with gold thread spelling out one word. No. She walked the length of the stage, stopped beside Adrian, still motionless, still under contract, still silent, and looked him directly in the eye. Then she took his hand. And slowly, turned him around to face the crowd. The back of his tuxedo jacket had been embroidered, without his knowledge, in dark red silk script, "I left her. She built better." The crowd erupted. Half in awe. Half in horror. All in complete surrender to her narrative. The live stream hit 12 million viewers in 40 minutes. Within an hour. #Revenge Collection was trending in 42 countries. Vogue declared the show a feminist masterpiece in 12 gowns and 1 puppet. The Guardian called it a dismantling of male privilege stitched in couture. Late-night shows in America were already replaying the moment Adrian was turned to the audience like a mannequin of his own downfall. No one had ever seen anything like it. She took her final bow alone. No co-director. No team behind her. Just Isla. Drenched in gold light, surrounded by a silence so reverent, it almost sounded like prayer. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She looked into the camera and gave a single, slight nod, not for approval, but for closure. And then the lights went out. Chapter 19, Adrian's Final Humiliation. For a man who once ruled rooms with his silence, Adrian Crest now found silence to be unbearable. It chased him from the runway, clung to him in the corridors, followed him all the way to the underground garage of the Palais Garnier, where he sat slumped in the back seat of a black car, tie undone, cufflinks in his lap, staring blankly out the window as the world he built burned just beyond the glass. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Because everything he had ever feared, exposure, irrelevance, public pity, had happened. And worse. She made it look beautiful. By midnight, the footage had gone viral across every platform imaginable. TikTok edits with dramatic music. Twitter threads analyzing his body language. Instagram stories from guests captioned "Is this real life?" Headlines that gutted him with surgical efficiency. From billionaire to backdrop, Adrian Crest reduced to prop in Isla's fashion coup. Style wire. He weaponized her wedding. She made him the final look. The fashion standard. When the muse becomes the master, Isla Devereux's show ends Adrian Crest's career. Vanity Plus. Every platform echoed the same sentiment. This wasn't just a show. It was an execution. His phone buzzed non-stop, texts from investors, board members, exes, his mother, even his PR team. All urgent. All in panic mode. He didn't read them. Because he knew there was nothing left to say. The company. Isla now controlled the brand image. The press. Unreachable. They'd chosen their queen. The public. They weren't laughing. They were cheering. Back in the Garnier, Adrian had escaped to the private dressing room behind the stage after the show. He ripped off the jacket, the one embroidered with "I left her. She built better." He stared at it, trembling. He hadn't known. Hadn't seen it coming. That message had been sewn inside the lining of the jacket, invisible until Isla turned him toward the spotlight. "I left her. She built better." He read it again and again until the words blurred, not from tears, he wasn't crying, but from the weight of something he didn't know how to carry. Not guilt. Not grief. Something more grotesque. Irrelevance. He sat on the edge of the makeup counter, staring into the mirror, still lit by the glow of stage bulbs. Outside the thick walls, he could hear it, cheering. The sound of the crowd rising to its feet. The pounding applause that once belonged to him. Now it rose for her. And he had been a part of it, just not the way he wanted. Not as a creator. Or visionary. But as a prop. A symbol. A warning. Isla hadn't just ended his career. She had immortalized his failure. There was a soft knock. He didn't answer. The door opened anyway. It was Celeste, his once trusted strategist. The woman he'd relied on to help him recover his reputation. The same woman who, he now realized, had been working for Isla all along. She stepped inside, holding a sleek black folder. "I thought you should know," she said softly, placing it beside him on the vanity. The resignations begin tomorrow. He didn't look at her. She paused at the door, her voice quiet but unwavering. She gave you a chance, Adrian. You could have walked away with dignity. He finally looked up, voice hollow. And instead, I was turned into a puppet. Celeste nodded. You were always a puppet. She just let the world see the strings. Then she left him there, alone in a dressing room that still smelled of power and perfume, and shut the door behind her. For hours, Adrian didn't move. He didn't speak. He sat in the dark with the jacket beside him, the stitches glinting under the vanity lights. I left her. She built better. There was no recovery. No pivot. No apology strong enough to erase what had just been immortalized in gold-threaded humiliation. He had weaponized her pain. And she had transformed his legacy into a cautionary tale, told in couture. Chapter 20, Behind the Velvet Curtain. The theater had emptied. The applause had faded. The cameras were off. The guests were gone. And in the echoing silence of the Palais Garnier's backstage wing, two people stood behind a heavy velvet curtain, the only place left in Paris where they weren't being watched. Isla. Adrian. Alone. Not as CEO and star. Not as rivals. Just Isla and Adrian. The woman who had risen. And the man who had fallen. Adrian leaned against the cool stone wall, arms crossed, still wearing the remains of the tuxedo, the jacket now folded over a chair, stripped of its public shame, but not its weight. Isla stood opposite him, a vision in the afterglow of her triumph, still in the black silk gown, still radiant under the low theater light, still sharp enough to wound with a glance. She didn't speak first. She waited. Because she had nothing left to prove. I assume you're satisfied, Adrian said finally, his voice low, raw, stripped of all polish. Isla tilted her head. You assume too much. Still. His mouth tightened. You humiliated me. I told the truth. You planned this. I survived this, she snapped, her voice cutting through the air. You want to talk about plans? You wrote one. With my name on it. With my worth calculated down to the decimal. He looked away. You used me, she continued, softer now, but no less lethal. You used love like a loan application. You wanted my power without my presence. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. Isla took a step closer, not threatening, but searching. Tell me the truth, Adrian. Just once. Was any of it real? He was silent for a long time. Then, finally, he said it, the thing she had feared, and yet somehow expected. I wanted it to be. She blinked. But you didn't let it be. He shook his head, almost to himself. I was drowning. I saw you as a life raft. And I didn't stop to wonder if I was pulling you under with me. She didn't speak. Because that was it. That was the truth. And for once, it didn't hurt. Not like it used to. I never hated you, Adrian said suddenly. Not even after you exposed me. I didn't do it to hurt you, Isla replied. I did it to free myself. He looked at her then, really looked at her, not as the woman he'd failed, but as the woman he could never reach again. And that, he realized, was what hurt the most. He could survive disgrace. He could rebuild fortune. But he would never again stand beside her. Not as a partner. Not even as a rival. She had outgrown the story he tried to write for her. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled tight. And then, for the briefest moment, something flickered. A shared memory. A glance. The soft breath of what once was. He stepped forward. So did she. Close. Too close. Their faces inches apart, lips parted, the ghosts of their past hovering like perfume between them. But then Isla pulled back. Not with anger. Not with regret. With peace. "I'm not yours anymore," she whispered. And this time, it wasn't a declaration. It was a benediction. She turned to go. Her heels silent on the worn wood stage. She paused only once, by the curtain. "If you want to rebuild," she said without turning, "don't try to resurrect what you were. That man's story is finished." Adrian nodded once, almost to himself. And then she was gone. He stood there for a long time, surrounded by the echoes of a masterpiece he had nothing to do with, but had once inspired, in the worst way. He wasn't the villain. He wasn't the hero. He was just a man who had underestimated the woman who would one day stand on the stage he built, and steal it back. Chapter 21, A Crisis of Couture. Isla Devereux had always known that fashion was fickle. But she hadn't expected victory to be this quiet. 2 weeks after the Revenge collection shattered records, rewrote headlines, and brought Adrian Crest's empire to its knees, Isla stood alone in her office, surrounded by fabric swatches, half-drunk espresso, and silence. No cameras. No front-row flashes. Just the aftertaste of triumph. At first, the post-show period had felt euphoric. Maison Devereux's online store crashed 3 times under the weight of global pre-orders. Her team received requests for interviews from every major outlet, from the New York Times to The Economist. 3 museum curators reached out to purchase pieces from the Revenge collection for permanent exhibition. She was named Woman of the Year by Le Mode Moderne. And yet, with every accolade came something else, whispers. It began with an op-ed in the Paris Review of Fashion. Is Isla Devereux leading a revolution, or orchestrating a personal vendetta? Then a lukewarm review in the International Fashion Chronicle questioned the tastefulness of turning heartbreak into theatre. One must wonder if the Revenge collection elevated fashion, or simply exposed a new kind of spectacle, vengeance disguised in silk. On social media, the tone shifted subtly. Love her power, but she's starting to feel unrelatable. We get it, girl. You won. Heel. She weaponized couture, but when does it stop being art and start being ego? The same crowd that had screamed her name 2 weeks earlier now whispered doubt behind the screen. Isla read every word. She didn't flinch. But she felt it. Within the walls of Maison Devereux, tension stirred. A key investor paused a planned Series B funding round, citing brand volatility. One of the 3 creative directors under Isla requested a sabbatical after claiming the work environment was too intense. An internal Slack thread leaked to the press, showing junior employees referring to Isla as the Ice Queen in couture. The same ruthlessness that built her empire now threatened to isolate her inside it. Hoping to control the narrative, Isla agreed to a rare sit-down with Harper's Bazaar Global. The idea was to highlight her upcoming sustainability initiative, Silken Roots. The interview began cordially, but midway, the journalist leaned in, eyes sharp behind her glasses. "Do you worry," she asked, "that in destroying Adrian Crest's reputation, you've become exactly what you were fighting against?" The room went cold. Isla blinked once. "No," she said. "Because I don't destroy for sport. I destroy for balance. It was the truth. But not the soundbite they wanted. The next day, the quote headlined the article. I destroy for balance. Isla Devereux. Subhead, From Muse to Mogul, has fashion's most powerful woman become its most feared. Back at her penthouse, Isla stood barefoot on her balcony, robe draped loosely, the night wind tugging at her undone braid. Paris shimmered below her like a city on the edge of worship, or revolt. Inside, her phone vibrated. Lucian Gray. He had been uncharacteristically quiet since the show. Tonight, his message was simple. You changed the game. But games have rules, Isla. They'll come for you next. Make sure you're ready. She stared at the screen. He was right. She turned off the phone. For the first time in months, there was no one to text. No one who would truly understand what it felt like to win everything and still feel like she was standing alone in a mirrored room, surrounded by her own reflection, but never truly seen. Was this what power felt like? Not victory, but vigilance. She walked back into her apartment, removed her earrings, and stood in front of her massive wall-length mirror, the same one where she had once envisioned her revenge. Now she stared into it and asked the one question no headline had dared to pose. Is this who I wanted to become? And the mirror, like the world, offered no answer. Chapter 22, The Tell-All Interview. Isla Devereux had been photographed in diamonds. Worshipped in couture. Immortalized in gold thread. But she had never truly spoken. Not since the wedding that wasn't. Not since the Revenge collection rewrote every rule. Not since the industry turned her from muse to mogul, then began to wonder if she'd gone too far. Now, she would speak. Not for spectacle. Not for strategy. But for herself. The offer came from Elise Marchand, a seasoned journalist known for her elegance and integrity, and her refusal to play games. She didn't chase clicks. She chased truth. Her show, La Voix Nue, The Naked Voice, was intimate, long-form, deeply personal. It was the only media platform Isla had never granted access to. Until now. The agreement, no pre-approved questions. No entourage. No glam team. Just Isla, Elise, a chair, and the cameras. Let them see the woman Elise had said. Not the icon. The interview was filmed in black and white, on a minimalist soundstage draped in sheer fabric. There were no logos. No lighting tricks. Just raw light and shadow, enough to make even power seem fragile. Isla wore a simple cream slip dress, no earrings, no makeup except for mascara. Her hair was pulled back in a soft knot. For the first time in a decade, she looked less like a symbol and more like someone real. And when the red light of the camera flicked on, she did not pose. She exhaled. Elise began softly. Why now? Isla looked directly into the camera, then at Elise. Because silence is a weapon, she said. And I've wielded it long enough. She didn't smile. She didn't blink too much. Her voice was steady, but not rehearsed. Each word felt chosen, not for effect, but for clarity. When asked about that day, the Hôtel Plaza Athénée, the gown, the message, Isla paused. She didn't cry. But she did close her eyes. I wasn't embarrassed, she said. I was erased. That's what betrayal feels like when it's public, not heartbreak, but erasure. As if everything you were, the love, the laughter, the future, never existed. She looked up. I needed the world to see that I hadn't disappeared. I'd been watching. Waiting. Becoming. Elise asked the question everyone had whispered for weeks. Was the revenge collection about art, or retribution? Isla tilted her head thoughtfully. It was about memory, she replied. About making sure mine wasn't buried under his version of the story. I didn't need the world to take my side. I needed them to know I had won. And then, more quietly. It wasn't about hurting him. It was about healing me, in the only language I had left. The questions deepened. Do you ever feel like you've become what you were fighting against? Isla's gaze lowered. Sometimes, she admitted. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I see armor, but no skin beneath it. She paused. I didn't mean to build a fortress. I meant to build a home for myself. But power changes things. It isolates. And the truth is, the throne is higher than I imagined. And colder. For the first time, her voice wavered. I won. And yet, some nights, it still feels like I lost. Elise leaned in. Do you forgive him? A long pause. The air hung heavy. Isla folded her hands, then unfolded them. Not yet, she said. But I'm working on forgiving myself. For trusting the wrong man. For staying silent too long. For becoming so sharp I cut people who wanted to help. Her eyes lifted. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's freedom. When La Voix New aired that Friday evening, 8.7 million people tuned in live, a record for a French-language interview program. Clips were translated into 27 languages. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. Celebrities reposted her quotes. Therapists cited her words in posts about agency and emotional recovery. But the biggest shift. The tone of public discourse. For the first time in months, the world stopped debating if Isla was too cruel, too cold, too calculating, and started talking about what it means to be resilient and real. Isla returned to her penthouse that night alone. No parties. No champagne. Just her. She took off the dress. Removed the mascara. She stood in front of her mirror again, the same one that once reflected rage, then power. Now, it reflected something new. Peace. Chapter 23, The Billionaire's Apology. There were no teaser trailers. No cryptic press releases. No red carpets or flashbulbs. Just a still image posted on a white background, Adrian Crest, seated alone on a simple leather chair, no designer logos in sight, looking smaller than the world remembered him. The caption beneath it read: The interview 9 p.m. One network. No edits. No one had expected this. Not after weeks of silence. Not after being turned into a human prop in the most iconic fashion show of the decade. Not after vanishing behind boardroom exits and PR ghosts. But here he was. Adrian. The man who built an empire on illusion. About to go on record. The network was global, but the studio was intimate, intentionally so. One camera. A neutral backdrop. No interviewer this time. Just Adrian, speaking directly to the audience. No tie. No cufflinks. A soft navy sweater over a crisp white shirt. His hair slightly out of place, the way grief forgets to groom. The broadcast opened with silence. Then the camera zoomed in. And the man who once controlled entire fashion weeks with a whisper began to speak. I'm not here to explain, he began, his voice quiet, almost fragile. I'm here to confess. There was no script. No teleprompter. Just notes, handwritten on a legal pad resting on his lap, but he barely looked down. Because the words had been sitting inside him for months. I used Isla Devereux, he said plainly. I used her name, her image, her heart, not as a partner, but as a product. I convinced myself it was necessary. Strategic. Even mutual. He looked straight into the camera. It was neither. He went deeper than anyone expected. I didn't fall in love. I fell into desperation. And she was the only thing in the world that still glittered when I touched it. He paused. I told myself it was love. But love doesn't lie. Love doesn't draft documents with wedding timelines and stock boosts. Love doesn't leave a woman standing at the altar while the cameras roll. The screen stayed still. The camera didn't cut away. Because the audience needed to see the weight of those words on his face. I watched Isla become everything I never deserved, he continued. She rose. She built. She carved out space in an industry that once devoured her. He smiled, faint and hollow. And she did it in heels, while carrying the weight I put on her back. He looked down for a moment, and when he lifted his eyes again, they were wet, not performative, but broken in a way that only truth could crack a man open. She didn't ruin me. She revealed me. And then, simply, Isla, I owe you an apology. Not just words. Not just press-friendly remorse. He named it all. The proposal document. The false intimacy. The betrayal at the altar. The media manipulation. The silence. I treated you like a stepping stone when you were a monument. And when you walked away, I spent months mistaking humiliation for injustice, because I was raised to believe that men like me didn't need to ask for forgiveness. He folded his hands. But I'm asking now. He made it clear, this wasn't about redemption. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't want a rebrand. I'm not launching anything. He leaned in. This isn't about rebuilding my image. It's about acknowledging the one I shattered. He ended with the only words that mattered. I'm sorry. Publicly. Permanently. I'm sorry. Then, without flair or exit music, the screen faded to black. The interview aired in 68 countries. Within an hour. Adrian apologizes trended worldwide. Some said it was too little, too late. Others said it was the first time a billionaire had ever used a camera to dismantle himself instead of justify his sins. A few wrote, "This is what accountability should look like." But one headline captured the mood best. She spoke first. Now he finally listened. The London Telegraph. The next morning, Isla posted nothing. Made no statement. Did not react publicly. But inside her atelier, when one of her designers asked if she'd seen it, she said only, "Yes. And then, let's get back to work." Because the apology mattered. But her future didn't live inside his words. It lived inside her own. Chapter 24, The Kiss Scene Round the World. The final night of Paris Fashion Week was always a spectacle. But this year, it was an altar. Glittering lights bathed the Seine. Champagne flowed like gossip. The venue. A floating glass runway built over water, moored between the Pont Alexandre III and the Eiffel Tower. Designers whispered. Editors clutched their seats. Everyone waited for the show that had come out of nowhere. Crest // couture, a collection reimagined. The name Adrian Crest was back on the schedule. But no one knew what to expect. Least of all, Adrian. The show opened in silence. No music. No voiceover. Just Adrian himself, walking out alone onto the glass runway, dressed in a minimalist white suit, crisp, vulnerable, poetic. He didn't speak. He simply bowed. Not with grandeur, but with humility. The kind of gesture you offer when you've lost everything, then earned the right to stand up again. Then the lights rose, and the show began. Gone were the hard edges of his earlier work. No metallics. No ego. This collection, titled Resurgence, was delicate, intimate, and almost hauntingly soft. Sheer silks in moonlit tones. Draped chiffon that moved like breath. Fluid tailoring that suggested forgiveness, not structure. A final gown, a translucent dove-grey slip layered over words embroidered into the hem. I am what remains after the storm. The audience was stunned. It was fashion as penance. And it was beautiful. Just as the final model stepped off the runway and the crowd began to rise in applause, a second spotlight snapped on. From the far end of the platform, a silhouette appeared. Tall. Elegant. Unmistakable. Isla. Wearing nothing but a crimson trench coat and sky-high heels. The air left the room. No announcement. No build-up. Just Isla Devereux, walking toward Adrian with the kind of confidence reserved for queens, or women who had already destroyed a man once and still held the key to his resurrection. Adrian's eyes widened. His lips parted, stunned. She stopped just inches away from him. No mic. No script. Then, with a single, exquisite motion, she opened the coat and let it fall to the floor. The crowd gasped. Beneath it, the same gold-threaded bodice from her Revenge collection, now softened, paired with a diaphanous champagne skirt. A fusion of her strength and his softness. She leaned in. Took his face in both hands. And kissed him. Not a peck. Not a PR kiss. A real one. Long. Slow. Certain. And the crowd, once silent, erupted. Cameras flashed. Live streams crashed. Phones shook in hands as editors screamed into headsets, fashion bloggers wept, and social media imploded in real time. What is happening? I thought she buried him. Why am I sobbing? Isla and Adrian trended in 92 countries within an hour. And then, Isla turned to the cameras and said the words that would headline every magazine in the world the next day: he lost everything. I found myself. Now we begin again, together. She pulled out a small envelope and handed it to the front row, where Elise Marchand sat, stunned. Inside, a golden card that read: Coming this fall, Isla and Adrian. A wedding reimagined. Broadcast rights sold, $100 million. The crowd lost its mind. Some laughed. Some cried. Some just screamed. Because this was no longer fashion. This was mythology. And the gods had just announced their reconciliation. Within 24 hours. The clip had 1.2 billion views. Brands begged to sponsor the wedding. Journalists flooded the couple's PR team. Isla's social following doubled overnight. A record number of viewers pre-registered for the live stream, titled simply Revenge to Romance, the Final Chapter. Backstage, away from the lights, Adrian and Isla stood alone in a room filled with half-eaten pastries, racks of silk, and the scent of a dozen roses someone had left on the floor. They didn't speak at first. Then Adrian whispered, "You didn't have to save me." She smiled. "I didn't. I kissed you for me." Then she added, "And for the ratings, obviously." They both laughed. And for the first time in a long, long time, they felt whole. Chapter 25, Wedding 2.0, Runway to Romance. They said it was impossible. That no woman kissed the man who humiliated her at the altar and then married him anyway, not without it being a PR stunt, a revenge scheme, or a fever dream spun in couture. But on a lavender sky evening in Paris, just as the first stars blinked into view, the world tuned in to witness something else entirely. Forgiveness. Rewritten. In diamonds and silk. And it began, as it once ended, at the Hôtel Plaza Athénée. The Plaza Athénée had hosted monarchs, movie stars, and legends. But tonight, it was hosting mythology reborn. The entire hotel had been transformed into a living fashion set. A mirror dial stretched from the grand entrance through the crystal-laden courtyard, flanked by golden roses, swan feather florals, and miniature fountains that ran with rose. Over 800 guests filled the terraced balconies above, sipping iced Veuve Clicquot from gold-rimmed goblets, draped in gowns and tuxedos personally styled by Maison Devereux. Every camera was live. Every screen in the world was watching. Even the moon looked like it had RSVP'd. The wedding rights had been sold to Globe Network for $100 million. That included a 3-hour live special titled Runway to Romance, the Isla and Adrian story. A behind-the-scenes docu-series streaming the week before. Exclusive fashion line drops every hour of the event, with shoppable looks. And a closing musical performance by Beyoncé, because of course. The wedding wasn't just love. It was a luxury ecosystem. Isla arrived last. A helicopter hovered overhead. The camera feed cut to a glittering white barge floating down the Seine. On it, Isla stood beneath a sheer crystal veil that spanned 10 feet behind her, held by 4 attendants in matching blush satin. Her dress, a one-of-a-kind Maison Devereux creation. Layered pearl-threaded lace over gold mesh. A bodice sculpted to resemble a phoenix rising. A train that unraveled into floating silk petals as she walked. Every step left behind a trail of gold. Adrian waited at the mirrored altar beneath a cascading chandelier made entirely of blown glass orchids. He wore a soft dove-grey suit, no tie, collar open, and a boutonniere of white camellia, Isla's favorite flower. When she reached him, he whispered, "This time, I stay." And Isla smiled, eyes bright with all the fire and none of the rage. This time she whispered, "I lead." There was no officiant. Only a pre-recorded voiceover written by Isla and read by Elise Marchand. What is love, if not the courage to return? To be seen, broken, rebuilt, reborn. To write the next chapter not in fear, but in velvet ink and champagne breath. They exchanged vows they had written at opposite ends of the world, but both ended with the same line. I choose you. Not as a fantasy, but as my reality. And when they kissed, the Eiffel Tower lit up in synchrony. After the ceremony, the guests spilled into the ballroom for a reception designed to dethrone Versailles. A champagne fountain the size of a yacht, cascading from the top floor to the courtyard. Live orchestras on rotating platforms. A 5-tier wedding cake designed by 3 Michelin-starred chefs and shaped like a golden swan. Custom cocktails named after their most infamous chapters. The Runaway Bride, Rose, Jalapeno, Regret. Chapter 15, Vodka, Lime, Vengeance. Kiss scene round the world, champagne, strawberries, redemption. At midnight, the couple stepped onto the rooftop. The world watched as they stood under $1 billion sky. The crowd below gasped as the entire Paris skyline lit up with fireworks choreographed to a string quartet rendition of Young and Beautiful. Slow-motion cameras captured them kissing under the bursts of pink, gold, and silver, Isla's veil blowing like a silk comet, Adrian holding her waist as if he'd never let go again. They laughed. Then kissed again. And again. Because now, the world wasn't watching them crash. It was watching them rise. As the credits rolled on the live special, a handwritten line appeared over a still of them dancing under falling confetti. Some love stories are born in glitter. Ours was forged in fire. Isla and Adrian. Because every broken heart deserves a comeback. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional romance every week. Hit like, drop a comment, and ring the bell so you never miss a moment of betrayal, redemption, and powerful love. And don't keep the drama to yourself, share this story with someone who lives for twists just like you. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is becoming unforgettable.